The sun was just starting to set, casting a golden glow over the city streets. Maya had just wrapped up a long day at work and was ready to head home. Dressed in a sleek black blazer and heels, she carried herself with confidence as she walked toward her car, a brand new, fully loaded luxury sedan. It was the kind of car that turned heads, and tonight was no different. But one pair of eyes lingering on her vehicle didn't belong to an admirer. They belonged to trouble. A police officer stood a few feet away, eyeing the car with suspicion. His expression hardened as Maya approached. Before she could even unlock the door, he stepped forward, blocking her way. "Excuse me, ma'am. This your car?" he asked, his voice laced with doubt. Maya raised an eyebrow. "Yes, it is. Is there a problem?" The officer folded his arms. "Mind showing me some ID? This looks like a stolen vehicle." Maya took a deep breath, keeping her cool. She had dealt with situations like this before, too many times, in fact. But this officer wasn't just skeptical. He was already convinced she didn't belong in that car. "Sir, I don't think that's necessary," she said firmly. He smirked. "Either you show me proof, or I'll have to assume this car was obtained illegally." Maya tilted her head, studying him for a moment. Then, slowly, she reached into her blazer and pulled out a badge. "FBI. And now I need your badge number." The officer's smirk disappeared, his face drained of color. He had just made the biggest mistake of his career. For a long moment, the officer didn't move. His confidence, his authority, everything had just been flipped upside down. His eyes flickered between Maya's badge and her face, as if trying to process what had just happened. "Is there a problem, officer?" Maya asked, her voice steady. The officer cleared his throat, shifting his stance. "I was just doing my job," he muttered, but the arrogance from before was gone. Maya could see it in his eyes. He wasn't expecting this. He thought she was just another person he could intimidate. But now he was standing in front of someone who not only knew the law, but enforced it at the highest level. She didn't put her badge away just yet. Instead, she studied him carefully. "Funny, because it didn't seem like you were doing your job. It seemed like you were profiling me." The officer tensed. "That's not what this is." Maya tilted her head slightly. "Really? Because I didn't see you stopping anyone else. Just me. And I have a feeling you didn't expect me to be FBI, did you?" The tension in the air thickened. A few people had slowed down nearby, sensing something was off. The officer glanced around quickly, probably realizing this situation was drawing attention. Maya wasn't about to let him off easy. "I assume you ran my plates before you confronted me," she continued. "What did they say?" He hesitated. That was all the confirmation she needed. He already knew the car wasn't stolen, but he stopped her anyway. The question now wasn't whether he had made a mistake. It was how far he was willing to go to cover it up. And Maya wasn't about to back down. The officer's jaw tightened as he shifted uncomfortably, glancing around as if searching for a way out of this mess. Maya knew that look well. It wasn't guilt, it was fear. Fear of what would happen next, fear of being exposed. "You ran my plates," she repeated, her voice calm but firm. "And you saw nothing was wrong, but you still stopped me. Why?" He opened his mouth, but no words came out. His mind was scrambling, trying to come up with an excuse that would justify his actions. Maya wasn't going to give him that chance. "See, I deal with people like you all the time," she continued, stepping just a little closer. "You think you can get away with it because most people wouldn't question you. But I'm not most people." His radio crackled, breaking the silence between them. "Unit 12, status check." The officer hesitated before responding. "All clear," he said, his voice less confident than before. Maya folded her arms, keeping her gaze locked on him. "Let me guess, you weren't expecting this to be a simple traffic stop, were you?" The officer exhaled sharply, his frustration barely concealed. "Look, maybe I jumped to conclusions," he admitted, "but I was just being cautious." Maya gave a short, humorless laugh. "Cautious. That's an interesting way to put it." A car passed by slowly, the driver watching the scene unfold. The tension was thick, but Maya wasn't done yet. She could tell he wanted this to be over, but she wasn't going to let him walk away without consequences. "You know what I think," she said, her tone sharper now. "I think you realized your mistake the second I pulled out my badge, and now you're trying to figure out how to make this go away." The officer's face hardened, but he said nothing. Maya took a step back and tilted her head. "The real question is, how many times have you done this before?" His eyes flickered with something close to panic, because now this wasn't just about one mistake. This was about a pattern, a history, and Maya wasn't about to let it stay buried. The officer's breathing had changed, shallower, uneven. He was nervous now, but trying not to show it. Maya had seen this before, that moment when someone realizes they're cornered, but their pride won't let them admit it. "You're making this into something it's not," he said, his voice quieter now, but still defensive. "I wasn't trying to." Maya cut him off. "Trying to what?" "Accuse me of stealing my own car. Make me prove I belong here." She shook her head. "You knew exactly what you were doing." A silence stretched between them, thick with tension. The street lights flickered on, casting a glow over the scene. More people were slowing down, pretending not to watch but clearly listening. The officer must have felt the weight of the eyes on him, because he straightened his shoulders and tried to regain control. "If you've got a problem, you can take it up with my department," he said, his confidence starting to return. "Otherwise, we're done here." Maya studied him. He was trying to walk away, trying to shut this down before it got any worse for him. But she wasn't finished. "You really think that's how this works?" she asked, tilting her head slightly. "You stop me, try to intimidate me, and then just walk away when it doesn't go your way?" The officer clenched his jaw, but said nothing. Maya took a slow step closer. "I already have your badge number, your name, and I have a feeling this isn't the first time you've pulled something like this." His face paled just slightly, but he still held his ground. "You don't know anything about me." Maya let a small, knowing smile cross her lips. "That's where you're wrong. Because you just made the mistake of targeting someone who does know how to investigate people like you." The officer shifted, his fingers twitching near his radio. He knew he was trapped. If he tried to push back, he risked exposing himself further. If he backed down, he looked weak, and Maya could see that realization sinking in. The tension reached a boiling point, the air thick with unspoken words. And just when it seemed like he might finally say something, a new voice cut through the air. "Excuse me, is there a problem here?" Maya turned. Another officer was approaching, his expression unreadable. The energy shifted, but the danger wasn't gone. If anything, it had just escalated. Maya turned to face the new officer, her instincts kicking in. He was older, more composed, his uniform crisp and his eyes sharp. He scanned the situation quickly, his gaze lingering on her badge still in her hand. The first officer exhaled, relieved. "No problem, sir, just a misunderstanding." Maya narrowed her eyes. A misunderstanding. That wasn't what he had called it a few minutes ago, when he was all but accusing her of stealing her own car. And now, with backup arriving, he wanted to change the narrative. The new officer looked between them, his expression unreadable. "Misunderstanding," he repeated, "because from what I see, an FBI agent is standing here looking very unimpressed, and you look like you just got caught doing something you shouldn't." The first officer stiffened. "I was just doing my job." Maya gave a short laugh, but there was no humor in it. "That's what he keeps saying." She turned to the second officer. "But you and I both know that's not what happened." The second officer nodded slightly, like he had already guessed as much. Then he did something Maya didn't expect. He looked at her car. Not just a passing glance, but a real look. His brow furrowed, his eyes scanning the details. Maya caught it immediately. That wasn't a casual glance. He was looking for something, and suddenly, a thought hit her like a bolt of lightning. This wasn't just about profiling. This wasn't just a cop with an attitude. There was something about her car. Her stomach tightened. Why do I feel like I just stepped into something bigger than I realized? She muttered, more to herself than anyone else. The second officer's eyes flicked back to her, his expression unreadable. But Maya could see it now, the hesitation, the calculation. And just like that, the game had changed. Maya's pulse quickened as she studied the second officer's face. He was too calm, too measured. This wasn't just about covering for his fellow officer. There was something more at play. She followed his gaze back to her car, every detail replaying in her mind. She had parked here less than 10 minutes ago. The car was locked. No alarms had gone off. So why was he so interested in it? Then she saw it. A slight gap near the front bumper. Barely noticeable, but enough to make her stomach drop. Maya took a slow step back, keeping her expression neutral. "You sure there's no problem here?" she asked, watching the second officer closely. He hesitated. It was barely a second, but it was enough. She exhaled sharply. "You planted something on my car, didn't you?" The first officer tensed, but it was the second officer whose expression truly changed. His jaw clenched, his eyes darting to the first cop before quickly masking his reaction. That was it. That was all the confirmation Maya needed. Her instincts screamed at her to move. She calmly pulled out her phone and took a step toward her car. "You won't mind if I check something then," she said, keeping her voice even. The second officer took a step forward, his hand hovering near his holster. "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step away from the vehicle." Maya turned her head slightly, her expression turning cold. "Oh, now you're calling me ma'am? Funny, because a minute ago, your guy here was treating me like a suspect." The tension thickened. People were fully watching now. A few had their phones out, recording. The officers knew they were running out of options. Maya kept her voice steady but firm. "You planted something, hoping to pull me in on false charges. You saw my car, made an assumption, and thought you'd get away with it. But you didn't count on me being FBI, did you?" The second officer's fingers twitched. "You're making a mistake." Maya's lips curled into a smirk. "No, you did." Before he could react, Maya turned, yanked open her car door, and grabbed the dashboard camera tucked inside. She raised it high for everyone to see. "This has been recording the entire time." The officers froze. Maya tilted her head. "I wonder what it caught." The first officer looked like he was about to be sick. The second officer, he was already stepping back, as if calculating his next move. But Maya wasn't finished. She turned to the growing crowd. "You all saw what happened here," she said clearly. "So if anything happens to me or this footage, we all know exactly why." A few people murmured in agreement. The officers were trapped. Any wrong move now would only make things worse for them. The second officer let out a slow breath and finally nodded. "You should get going, Agent." Maya held his stare for a long moment before slipping into her car. She started the engine, watching them in her rearview mirror. Neither of them moved, but she could see the panic in their eyes. As she pulled away, her hands tightened on the wheel. She had won this round, but she knew this wasn't over. Because if they had planted something on her car, it meant one thing. Someone had wanted her out of the way, and now she was going to find out who. Maya drove in silence, her mind racing. The weight of what had just happened settled in, but she wasn't shaken. She was focused. This wasn't just about two cops abusing their power. This was something bigger, something planned. Someone had wanted her caught up in a situation she couldn't escape, but they underestimated her. She glanced at the dashboard camera resting in the passenger seat. The footage inside was now her strongest weapon. It wasn't just about clearing her own name. It was about exposing the truth. The first officer had been reckless, acting out of prejudice. But the second one? He had been calculated. He knew what he was doing. That meant there was a reason behind it. Maya pulled into her driveway and sat there for a moment, watching the street in her rearview mirror. Nothing seemed out of place, but she knew better than to let her guard down. Someone had gone through a lot of trouble to try and set her up, and now they knew she was onto them. She exhaled, grabbed her phone, and made a call. A familiar voice picked up on the other end. "Maya, everything okay?"